My name is Gregg Brenes. I'm the senior pastor of this beautiful church and feel privileged and honored to be so. Let me tell you how I got here real quick so that you understand where we're going today in our message. We were going to start a series called Made for Mondays. And what I felt like would be really good is if we waited for next week so that you can understand why at 10:45 we're having a chili cook-off. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we're doing that, because 10 years ago, we were looking for, my wife and I and our family, were looking for a place to set down roots. We had lived here before, previous to this, and did college ministry at UH, had been gone for about 13 and a half years. And as we were looking for a place to set down roots, how do you say roots? Everybody's I still can't, I hear you saying, I still can't say it. It's roots, right? I'm just messing with you now. So I came to set down roots anyway. And one of the reasons why we did that, one of the main factors, was we wanted to be in an environment where we had somebody pouring into our life as we were pouring into the lives of others. And I want to encourage you, this is a main factor. If you go, you know what, I'm not a Christian though, that's okay. Whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, it is a main factor for our personal growth and for our flourishing in life, is to have somebody pouring into us while we pour into somebody else. It just facilitates the growth in our life. It's huge. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we do our children's ministry the way that we do it, and we do our youth ministry the way that we do it. You can be assured that on any given Sunday, we have people back there in our children's ministry that are dedicated to pouring into the life of your child. Right? Okay, that's right. She said that's right. But that is true. Our youth ministry is the same way. We got them in service today because we feel like what we're saying today is so important. So I want to encourage you parents, one of the best things that you can do, because every Sunday, 52 weeks of the year, there is somebody back in our children's ministry who wants to pour into the life of your child and support the values and support the things that you are encouraging your children to do. So this is a great environment. And in order for you to be able to instill in them your value, your love for church and community, you know what's really important? Is your actions, right? Remember when your parents used to say, you know, it's your actions. Your actions speak louder than words. And you go, I'm not sure about that. My parents, growing up, my parents took me to church, but they didn't go to church themselves. They thought it would be good for us, but they didn't, I guess, see the value of community of church, so they didn't go themselves. So by the time I was old enough to make my own decision, I said, well, my parents didn't go. I'm not going to go. I'm going to encourage you parents, if you want your children to value church and the community of church, best thing you can do is get them here, but also get yourselves here. You can't get this online. And I know you're going, Greg, you know, you're an okay preacher. There are a bunch of different preachers that are better online. I could listen to J.D. Greer, Tim Keller, blah, blah, blah. You can, and I would encourage you to do it because I do it as well. But you know what you can't get? You cannot get this community. You can't. And this is, when we started this church, this church started in 1958, but when we came and we gave it new life to this church was never meant to be about a bunch of church services. It wasn't. It was always meant to be about people who were connected in relationship to each other and who were helping connect other people in relationship to each other. That's really what this church has always been about and will always be about. We believe that circles are better than rows. And when I say that, I mean, on our services, which are great, they fulfill a purpose. On our services, you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody. But when we get together in smaller groups, we call them grace groups, we sit face to face with each other. And here's the truth. Our lives are not shaped by information. Your life is shaped by relationship. That's not to say information's not important. Information is very important. But the reality of the truth is our lives are shaped more by relationship than they are by information. And so that's why, rather than just being shoulder to shoulder, we say it is vital that we get face to face with each other. Circles are better than rows. And so today I want to talk about that because we really do believe that life your life, your family, and everything that flows out of your life is shaped not just by the information you're taking in, but by the relationships that you're sharing with other people. Now, there's many reasons why this is true. And there's many reasons why being in a smaller community of people, not just a service, circle, is better than rows. I just want to talk about one big reason today, though. And this is a reason that has impacted my life since the time I was in college. When I was in college, I for 8 years before I got married, I lived in community with other Christians, other students who were moving in the same direction as me. For 8 years. After we got married and we started our own community, after a year of marriage, and I'm not. This is not prescriptive. I'm not saying that you should do this. I'm just describing what we did. In fact, I'm not sure we'd do it again, but anyway, this is what we did. We wanted the students to experience the value of what happens in community. So we found a 3-story home in Manoa that was for rent, and we blocked off the different levels. We made a women's level on the 2nd story, and then we made a guys' level on the bottom that we used to call the dungeon. And we got a group of students together, and we said, hey, look, we want to show you the value of living together, not just attending a church and being a part of a service, but living together in community with other people, having this face-to-face interaction. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to live with you guys to help you understand it. So we lived on the top floor. Again, this is not prescriptive. This is descriptive. We lived together with them on the top floor, the ladies on the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor. And they gained from this something that is vitally important. And I'm so glad for this. As my life continues to grow, it doesn't matter how many years. Some of you are going, but I've been a Christian for a long time. This will help you. And here's why. Because you and I, no matter how long you've been a Christian, no matter what you believe, no matter how strong of a person you are, we all have the tendency to drift. All of us. And the older you get, the tendency is not only stronger, but there's more riding on it. We all drift. We all do. And the bummer, wouldn't it be awesome if we drifted toward the right things? Like if in my life I just drifted towards spending better, and saving more, and investing more, and getting... This is not the way it happens, though, right? If it's good, we usually don't drift towards it. We usually drift away from it. I don't know why that is, but if it's... How many of you, right, don't you wish you drifted towards better health, better eating habits, better diet? I was so convicted this last week. I feel like, and personally, the Lord's been saying, you need to eat better, you need to eat better, you need to eat better. I went to a training, and you know what the topic was, right? I mean, this wasn't the major point, but a big point that was echoed through, you need to eat better. And at the beginning of the year, you know what I told myself, right? This year, I'm eating better. And I was really consistent for like 24 hours. Why? Because our tendency is to drift away from the things that are good. This is why when you go to Sandy Beach, one of my favorite beaches, Sandy Beach, you'll see these signs up on the beach. It says a strong current. There's a strong current. There's a strong pull. There's a movement. There's a natural movement of the ocean. And that movement of the ocean is not moving you toward the prime spot in the middle of the beach where the waves are barreling. That movement is moving you either to the left or to the right. And if you go to the right, this is what you see. This is an area called Chambers. It's moving you toward that area. Drift. We have the tendency to drift. Unfortunately, we typically drift away from the things that are good towards the things that are harmful for you and I. But that is true of all of us, no matter who you are. So this morning I want to talk about circles are better than rows in this context of drift and our tendency to drift. Because here's why this is so important this morning. Hebrews 2:14 says this. We must pay much more careful attention, therefore, to what we've heard so that we do not drift away. So the author of Hebrews has just talked about Jesus and the good news of Jesus Christ and having a relationship and following Jesus Christ. And he's going to juxtapose this with an example of how the Jews in the past, they allowed themselves to be pulled away, to drift away. It doesn't just go from A to Z. It goes from A to B to see. And slowly, incrementally, we just begin to drift away. And as much as we want to do the good thing, we tend to drift away from it. And as much as you want to have a relationship with God, the tendency for you and the tendency for me is to drift away from it, unless we are intentional to fight against the current of the drift. But in order to stay not drifting, we have to fight against the current. We have to swim against the current. But you know what we know? We know that when we put in the hard work, because it takes hard work. When you're out at Sandy or when you're at Makapu'u and you're trying not to go to the left or to the right, you have to work hard to stay in the sweet spot. But you know this, it is so worth it when you stay in the sweet spot. And when you get to the place where your budget is working, it takes work, right? How many of you have ever made it to that place? Okay. All right, this is really going to help us then. It takes work, but when we get there, it is so worth it to sacrifice and to save and to stay on that budget, because now I'm able to buy the car or go back to school, whatever. When you finish your degree, you have to fight the drift, because you know what? We live in Hawaii, and you walk outside and you go, oh, you know what? Steve Jobs, he never got a degree. And I'm sure he spent plenty of days on the beach. I think I'm going to go get inspiration on the beach. I'm not going to do my homework. So you have to fight. When you do the work and you receive the reward, it is so worth it. But you got to swim against the drift. You got to swim against the pool, right? Relationally, you want healthy relationships, and you got to be a healthy person. You got to engage in relationships in a way that honors God, honors the person that you're in relationship with. But in order to do that, there is a fight, there's a swim against the pull of culture, which says, you know what, it's okay, just do whatever. Everybody else is doing whatever. And so we got to fight against. That was weird, yeah? So some of you go like, oh, I never heard that. I never heard that either. Okay. You got to fight against it. We got to swim against it. But if you're swimming all by yourself, the pull is so much stronger and so much harder. We need other people. And you know this. It is easier to swim in the direction that you want to go when you're swimming with others who are going in that same direction, right? And if you're not going with others who are swimming in that same direction, you may have a great direction, but you know what? You're swimming against the current, and you're swimming all by yourself. It is so, so hard. And in the Bible, you see this over and over and over, and it's why the author of Hebrews says it. We were not meant to swim alone. You were not meant to swim alone. We were meant to swim with others. The pull of the current will always be there, but you and I were meant to swim together with other people even. So that's why we need to be connected with, we need to be in community with, and why we believe that being in a circle with others is the best way to be intentional about not only our relationship with God, but His purpose for our lives. And so I want to look at 3 verses in the book of Hebrews this morning, and we're going to dig into these together today. Because this idea of drifting, it's not a new phenomenon. This is something that the early church, this is something that people forever have dealt with. And the reason why is because we just have the tendency to drift. And we have the tendency to drift away from things that are good. So here's what it says in Hebrews 3:12. See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart. That none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. So what is it about us, and why do we drift so easily? I want to answer that question today, and what we can do to make sure that it doesn't happen for us as we swim in God's direction. And like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, you know, when we read the Bible and you see the word you, most often it is actually spoken to not just an individual. This is not, you know, the author of Hebrews speaking to an individual. He's actually speaking to a community. So he's saying, I want you as a community to work on this together. That's why he says, you can put up the next version of the verse. See to it, brothers and sisters, that, and basically when he says you, it's like we talked about a couple weeks, it's a y'all. Y'all do this together. Y'all take care of one another. Y'all protect, y'all malama with each other. That means protect, take care, watch out for each other, so that nobody has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. He's not just speaking to an individual, he's speaking to the church body, and he's saying, this is y'all, this is a y'all thing. Do this with each other so that you don't have a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. So why is it that we are so prone to turn away from the living God? Why is that? It's because these little seeds get sown into our heart. These little doubts, these little things, hurts, offenses. Can't tell you how many people I've met who no longer are part of a church because they had a falling out with somebody in the church. But these little things that nobody, and here's the problem with just Rose being here. Nobody knows the seed that is within. And every drifting and falling away always begins with a little seed, a little doubt, a little unbelief, a little bad interaction. It was an offense. It was a hurt. It was something that became something big. But in a row, nobody knows what's going on in your heart. In fact, we're really good at making sure that nobody knows our stuff, right? No, you have to raise your hand. How many of you have just had experience? Like you go, I don't know if I believe in spiritual warfare. But Sunday morning, I guarantee you, will be spiritual warfare. If you got little kids, you won't be able to find their shoes. They'll have a poopy diaper on the way out the door. One will vomit on your outfit. And then you will inadvertently lock your keys. I've never done this. In the house as you're getting into the minivan. And then your wife, because she's really difficult, she's just arguing with you. No. You're just arguing. You're arguing on the way, and the kids are arguing, and they're bickering on the way. And then what do? When we get here, we wipe away the tears, we put on the makeup, we get out the door, and everything is good. And you have no idea what's going on inside. Because in a row, nobody knows. And the problem with that is that every drifting begins with a small seed. It all begins within, with a small seed. It's a doubt, it's something. But in a row, nobody knows. In circles, people know. I'm so grateful. Every Wednesday, I have a group of guys. We meet at 6:30. They're just the best group of guys. It's a safe environment. Right now, it's these 5 guys. You guys are invited. It's Waikiki Town Center, so if you live in the area. One of the gentlemen drives all the way from Hickam, bless his heart. But you know why that's really important for us, though, is, man, we just have this connection with each other, and we're able to share the things that nobody knows. Now, this is really important as we go on to this, because every drifting, it begins within. It begins with a small seed. And nobody knows in a row. Nobody knows in a row. In circles, people know. Now, my profession is one such that I get these calls all the time. I get a call from a frantic wife or a frantic husband, or I hear about a teenager who is experiencing something, and they're telling me, man, my wife and X, Y, Z, and they're going through this whole list of scenario. Now, the difficulty in that scenario is that because they have just been a community unto themselves, which is a legitimate community, nobody knows. And the help that they need, they cannot get because nobody knows. And so one day, they're just not here, and you go, well, whatever happened to someone? And nobody knows. And the author of Hebrews is going, that shouldn't happen in the church. It should be a community where at least somebody knows. Because by that point, she knows, he knows, but nobody else knows. And how many of you know somebody who could have been helped had somebody known before they got to that point where there was not much more that can be done? I mean, I know lots of people, man, I wish somebody would have known before you got to that point. Because now there's so much momentum in that direction, it is really hard. But nobody knew. But in circles, people knew. So if you are struggling, I don't want to see any husband or any wife struggle alone. I don't want to see any teenager have struggles in their family that nobody knows and could have helped them with. I don't want to see that. If you're struggling alone, you're swimming alone. And it is so much harder to swim against the tide and to stay from drifting when you're all alone. And again, that's why we say and why we believe and why we live out circles are better than rows. So here's what the author of Hebrews goes on to say. So he says, but encourage one another. encourage one another. And this particular use of the word encourage, it doesn't mean like, hey, you're doing a great job, way to go. I mean, that's not superficial, but we do that. It's actually saying you got to go deeper with each other. And he's saying, I want you to appeal to, there you go. He wants you to appeal to, I want you to urge strongly, I want you to exhort, beg, implore. I want you to entreat each other. You guys need to be so involved in each other's life, and we can't have that with everybody, but you can have it with somebody else who's so involved and aware of your life that they're aware of the things that you know that maybe nobody else knows. Why is that? Because every drift begins within, and it begins with a small seed. It begins with a small seed that we allow to grow. And so he's begging them and he's encouraging them that they would know what's going on with each other, know what's going on when somebody's not here, right? Somebody is not here before, they've not been here for a couple months, and you know what happened? They just got a job that had to work Sunday morning, and the more they work that job on Sunday morning, you know what happens when you miss a couple weeks of church? The less important that community, what I said today, well, you're not even going to remember it. And we begin to go, I'm okay, and then one day we're just out, and we go, how did I get here? But wouldn't it be nice to have somebody who knew about you and who cared enough to go, hey, you know what, I haven't seen you in a while, I just wanted to call and make sure. So he's saying, encourage one another, be in each other's lives to the point that when things start going south, there's somebody who knows about you, who wants to help you, who wants to be a part. And this is really the important part, this is the you part, who has the permission to say something to it, to speak into it. Now, I am really privileged. I got a group of pastors that I meet with once a month. Every Nation, we're part of Every Nation Ministries. Our pastors meet together once a month, and we have a small group together. And this is where we look in each other's eyes and we go, how's any seeds that shouldn't be in your heart? And I'm the first one to know. I got all kind of blind spots to look, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm thinking. And it's so helpful to have people who will look me and know what I'm thinking and what I'm going through. It's actually really scary for me not to have anybody. I got one of my mentors here in the island, Pastor Norman, is pastor of Grace Bible Church, Pearlside. I meet with him every other week, bi-weekly. And then I have my small group on Wednesday. So I'm not telling you, the older you get, you become absolved from this. For me, the older I get, the more I'm jumping into this. And I want to be known. And if there's any darkness, any seeds going on within me, I want somebody that knows. I don't want to be the guy who, after years of marriage, goes, you know what? We're just done. Because there was something that grew all those years undetected. I want somebody to know. I want somebody to not only know, but I want to have somebody who has permission. Only you can do this. You give them permission to speak to it. I tell those guys, look, you see anything, you can speak to it. And I got to tell you, it feels so good. No, it hurts. It really hurts. Sometimes when I hear back what I'm giving out, they're going, can I just tell you how that sounded? But it feels so good to see the underlying seed that was in it. The doubt, the negativity. So he says, but encourage one another, and this is how often we should do it, daily. It's not just a one-time thing. That means an ongoing thing. We're supposed to encourage each other daily as long as it's still called today. But encourage one another daily, and there's a reason why this is supposed to be an ongoing thing. He says, so that. Whenever you see the word so that or therefore, it always refers to something that has been said, and he's going to give like the whole summarization. So that there's a reason. Encourage one another daily so that you may not be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And the author of Hebrews turns sin into a person. Sin is like this entity that is always trying to deceive you and I. Always. Always trying to say, it's not that bad. It's not, don't worry, you won't go like they did. And always trying to deceive us. So the author says, don't let yourself be hardened by sin that is trying to deceive you. And one of the biggest ways that we deceive ourselves is by self-talk that we eventually end up believing. Right? It's those little voices in your head. Nobody will ever know. Everybody's doing it. You know what? I'm not sure I believe anymore. Yeah, God did that miracle back then, but I'm not sure He'll do it again. And I'm not sure that He could. And I'm not even sure about that miracle. It's all these little things that we self-talk ourselves. I don't think I can ever change or be different. And then eventually, over time, we begin to believe our own self-talk. Right? We begin to believe the things that we at one time thought was crazy talk, but now it's not so crazy talk, and it's more rational talk. And you know what? I'm not sure she's my soulmate, and you know, all these little things that we say to ourselves, unchecked, begin to grow and become these things that become more real and lead us to drift. And so, the author of Hebrews says, encourage one another day after day, every single day, so that you don't get deceived by sin and become hardened of heart. Because what we do is we talk ourselves into all kind of craziness, right? Let me ask you this question. What is it that you are saying to yourself these days? Now, in this case, the best defense against your self-talk is not you. You are not the best defense. Why? Because we are really good at convincing ourselves. Guys, come on, right? How many of you have ever convinced yourself that you needed, instead of that 55-inch TV, you needed the 65? I mean, football season, right? It'll build better community in our family. You know, I'm going to educate my wife on football. All those things, right? We are really good at deceiving ourselves. The best defense against deception is not you, it is we. We. You and I need somebody who can see, who knows what's going on, see things that we can't see, and who has permission to be able to speak. So what are you telling yourself these days? He doesn't love me. She doesn't love me. I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm not sure I believe. I'm not sure I need to be a part of following Christ anymore. I'm busy. What are you telling yourself these days? That if somebody were to hear what you were saying, you were to tell them, they would say, and if you're a lady, this pertains to you right here. They would say to you, sister, what you thinking already? How's that? How many of you get like on a scale of 1 to 5? Like, good? That was a 1 or a, sister, what you thinking? Right? You know the value. How many of you ever experienced just the value of communicating to somebody what's going on in your brain? For most of us, as the words are going out, we're thinking, dude, what am I thinking? And if it doesn't hit that point, when they go, okay, let me understand what you're saying. You're going to quit that job because the boss corrected your project. And then we go, yeah, now that I hear from you, it sounds pretty mental, right? There's value in just that. Now here's the advanced version for the brothers. Brother, or bruh, what you thinking? That's mental, yeah? You need some slaps. Or what? All right, that's it. I'm going to go change modes now. The best thing you can do is be in an environment where you can let somebody else in on the things that you're thinking. This doesn't mean everybody. This is not like, oh, Pastor Gregg said this, so I'm going to Instagram it, I'm going to, Snapchat, I'm putting it on Facebook. Please don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. That's not smart. But everybody needs someone that they can have say to them, I give you permission to say to me, what you thinking, bro? That's crazy talk. Because even though the drift begins within, left unchecked, it will lead to unbelief. Left unchecked, it leads to unbelief. It's just the little things, right? It's the little thoughts. It's the little seeds. It's the little things that nobody knows about. For most people, the reason why they're not in church today is not because they have this big theological, bam, I just don't believe in God anymore. It's, you know what, I met a girl, I started working on Sunday, I just stopped going to church as much, and they just drifted. It was just a little thing that happened, and they just drifted. It wasn't this big thing. And so he goes on in the scripture, and this last one we'll read in verse 14, and it almost seems like it's disconnected from the rest of it. But here's what he says. We have come to share in Christ. In other words, we know that we're Christians and that we belong to Christ if indeed we hold on to our original conviction firmly to the end. If we hold on to it firmly to the end. And so his point being that, or her point being that, the way that we know that we are Christians are if we hold fast our faith in God and we don't drift away from it. But the only way for that to happen, because we know our tendency is to drift, and we know it all starts with the seed within, and we know we drift away from the good things, our tendency, because of all of that, is to together, we're supposed to know how each other are doing. Church is more than just a service we come to. It is circles that we get into where we're face to face with one another, and somebody has not only knowledge of me, but they have permission to speak into my life. Why? It's not just so somebody can know all your business. It's so that they can help you do what you want to do, which is not drift away from God, which is not drift away from what God is calling you to do. So that's why he says, see to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. See to it. Get into each other's business. Get into each other's lives. People, I want to encourage you. Give people permission to say things. Give people permission to speak into your lives. It is not harmful. It is actually really helpful. Get into that kind of circle, that kind of proximity and relationship where people have that kind of access to you. Because you don't have to swim alone. And you weren't created to swim alone. You're actually created to swim with others. Circles are better than rows. Worship team, come and join me this morning. How many of you, as we're listening to this message, inside of you, somebody just goes, you know, I know that. It's so true, right? How many of you know somebody who made a financial decision that everybody around them saw, like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that? Or a relational decision, or a business decision, or a career choice that would have really helped had they had somebody who knew what they were going to do and just said, hey, you know what, this is what I'm thinking. Well, how does that sound? How many of you know somebody who ended up in a bad situation because they just didn't have that? I know I do. I know plenty of people. My heart breaks for them. And it could have been thwarted or remedied by doing what God had created to do in the beginning, which is to create a community of people who weren't just shoulder to shoulder in rows, but who were face to face in smaller circles, in smaller communities. We just happen to call ours grace groups. Because we all need connection, and we need somebody who knows not only what's going on inside of us, but who has the permission to speak into our lives. That's what we all need. That's why this is not just, this is a message, but this is not just a message. This is Bible. This is what we really believe. This church was never meant to be a place where we are just in big services all over. This is really meant to be a church where we are in smaller communities together, face to face, in circles, experiencing life together. I'm so grateful for the handful of guys in my group who just look at me and who speak truth to me. And sometimes honestly, it is painful, and sometimes it is offensive, and sometimes it pokes, but it's so nice to know that somebody knows what's going on in me, and they got my back, and they pray with me, and they stand with me, and they help me. We all need that, because you don't want to be struggling or swimming alone. You will not make it. The tendency of our lives is to drift. It all starts with a small seed. Somebody needs to know what's going on. Circles are better than rows. So look, if you've gotten connected or have not gotten connected yet, I want to encourage you to get connected. in a grace group. It's one of the reasons why we're having at 10:45, we're going to have a chili cook-off. It is our grace group kickoff because we're starting up for the fall, our grace groups once again, and a chili cook-off. So if you're going, you know what, I just want to at least check it out. I want to encourage you, take a step. Fill your stomach, go get some good food. We've got, how many people do we? 24 of our grace groups out there that cook food so that you can sample some of the food. We are having a contest. You can come and go as you want. Just may give you an interaction with our grace groups just so you know who's even in grace groups. What are our small groups? Who's in them? You'll be able to meet the people that are in our grace groups right outside at 10:45. Some of you have gotten disconnected from a smaller community of people, a grace group. I want to encourage you to get reconnected. My hope, my faith for our church is that we would have more people connected in grace groups than we have on Sunday service, on our weekend services. And we believe that is that important. So that's my hope, is that all of us would experience the community that Christ offered and that Christ gave his life for, and that you would find people who know about you and who have access to your life. So if you've gotten disconnected, get reconnected. And for those of you, your group somewhere along the line just kind of fizzled out, let's get it rebooted. Let's do that. Let's create that community once again. Grace group leaders, I want to encourage, you all as leaders of your group, man, there's so much value in what you do, and thank you for it. We have 34 groups right now. We have a goal of adding 6 brand new groups toward the end of the year. 6 brand new groups by the end of the year. And I believe truly that some of you will be a part of those new groups, and that God is going to do that. And God's going to add people who are not yet even part of this Sunday gathering together.